Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Mariam, and I'm a co-founder of Lawformer, which is a legal tech startup that helps in-house teams automate and streamline contract drafting and review process to close deals faster. This session is part of a series that is hosted by Lawformer on how in-house legal teams can leverage technology to do more with less. Today's discussion is brought to you in partnership with Wordsmith AI. And we are zeroing on a topic that's top of mind for many right now, which is how in-house legal professionals can use AI in their day-to-day work, where to start, what are the best practices to do so, and what are the areas to which AI is best applied to. And we've got the perfect person to guide us through all of this, Laura Jeffords Greenberg. I'll hand it over to Laura to introduce herself, and
Yeah.
then we'll jump right into the discussion.
Hi, well, thank you so much for having me. I am the head of the Legal AI Academy for Wordsmith AI. So my job is to teach lawyers how to use AI tools, both broad purpose tools like ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, and then legal specific tools like Wordsmith AI. So I have a fun job and I'm constantly learning because I'm sure, as everyone knows, these products are evolving so quickly. It's hard to keep up with everything.
That is so true. And thank you, Laura. And just wanted to comment briefly on your experience. You have a lot of in-house experience, and now teaching legal professionals how to use AI is basically your full-time job. And in a recent LinkedIn post, you even said that it takes 18 minutes a day to master AI so that it allows you to outperform 95% of people. So tell us why you're so passionate about teaching legal professionals about AI and why you think that's important in today's climate.
Well, I've been in-house most of my career in supporting technology teams. And in that, I've seen different waves of technology come through. So 360 video to VR to AR or augmented reality to then cryptocurrency and blockchain. And none of those really impacted my daily work other than providing me legal work to advise on. And it wasn't until ChatGPT came out in November of 2022 that I actually was like, oh, I think this technology can actually help lawyers, right? It's based on large language models. It works with text and language, and that's what we work in every day as legal professionals. So with this advance of technology, I really see opportunities for a lot of our outdated, old, and manual processes to be updated. And so that's what really got me excited about AI. And what continues to keep me excited is how can we push our industry forward so we can get rid of those manual, outdated tasks and automate some of the work that we actually don't need to be doing so we can spend time on the more interesting and rewarding work. Hopefully, like the big picture is with more AI adoption in the legal industry, then our profession can be happier and healthier. So that's the big vision, I think, that I'm working towards.
Wonderful. You mentioned ChatGPT and you mentioned also boring tasks and making the profession healthier. And that reminds me of when ChatGPT first blew up. There was this viral post going around that said, "I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can do poetry and art, not the other way around." And there are a lot of people in the legal space who think that AI is best applied to some of those, boring, less entertaining or intellectual parts of legal work. So what's the legal version of laundry and dishes, and what are those, boring but valuable tasks that AI should be doing for us, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, I think if we have, let's just take contracts. If you have playbooks, and you're very clear on what you accept and you don't accept in, let's say, high repetition tasks in contracts that are important, but not extremely important, right? We can understand sort of like middle of the road contracts where you have playbooks applying AI to them so they do the first pass, the first review of it, and apply your standard clauses. Or similarly, if you always have the same pushback with your own contracts, and you know that you're always going to have conversations around these clauses, right? Have AI do the first pass of that, or even use AI to then help train and empower your business people to do that. Also, just general productivity tasks, which are boring, like we can talk about redacting or filling out templates, writing emails, those kind of tasks that don't necessarily take a lot of thought or energy, but they still take up brain power or brain space. If we can get rid of some of those, that would be great. But on the other hand, AI is also really great at helping us think through things, to brainstorm, to come up with counter arguments, to really strengthen our positions or even challenge how we think. So I think you can use it for boring tasks, like let's say even learning to write Excel formulas, right? That's something that has been annoying, but super easy to, I can look like I know what I'm doing in Excel now, to helping me go through maybe a presentation that I'm giving to the board and prep me for all their potential questions and think through all these different scenarios and ways that it might go. So then I feel extremely prepared when I go in and do my board presentation. So I do think AI can run the gamut from boring to then helping you with those higher value strategic tasks as well.
Wonderful. You mentioned, contracts and transactional workflows. You mentioned formulas. You mentioned more strategic thinking, idea generation. And we'll focus on contracts in a little bit. But if you were to think from your experience how legal professionals today are using AI, so what are the tasks or kind of areas where it's most frequently applied to? And do you think those are the areas where AI should be most frequently applied to? Is there something that, are there areas where you think AI isn't yet applied to as the way it should be? And more importantly, how can legal teams start experimenting and using AI without needing a big system change or overhaul? Are there like small ways they can sort of like start experimenting and playing with it?
First of all, I think like teams are all over the place. It depends what company you're at, what access you have to tools, AI tools, what industry you're in. So generally, we're seeing, right, like tech companies, their teams are generally first adopters. Interestingly, in Denmark, an insurance company was one of the first adopters to have their own in-house chat GPT that the legal team was using. So I think I've not seen anything consistently other than teams are at all different various stages. And then within teams, you usually have at least a couple people that are avidly using it, AI, at least for personal use, and then people who haven't touched it, unless you're an AI first, really pushing AI on your legal team. So there's a wide, I think, disparity and also gap in knowledge and use in AI, to answer that question. And then you had a second part to the question, which I have now lost. Could
Which
you
was like
remind me?
how teams that haven't yet experimented with AI, are there easy ways to do it that doesn't require a systemic change? Where would you recommend they start? Whether it's on the individual or team level.
I mean, I would definitely recommend starting at the individual level, right? Start to
Mm,
upskill yourself and empower your team to do that. And the easiest way you can do that is don't start with legal work and start with some of the
mm,
free tools, free ChatGPT, free Claude. A lot of people I work with have Copilot. Do the free Copilot and just start playing with it. You can use it for, I actually was at a presentation and we talked about gardening. I've used it for a garden. I've used it to help me plan outfits. We use it for meal planning. I use it for exercise planning. Right, there are all these ways that you can use these tools that have nothing to do with legal work. So it's low risk, and you just get to start to use them. So a lot of the AI tools we're also noticing have
mm.
different personalities and different responses. I think Ali K. Miller, who I also recommend following on LinkedIn for business and talks about AI use, she summarized it, I think, quite well that ChatGPT tends to be more creative.
Mm.
Claude is really good for writing and in particular legal writing. And then Gemini seems to be more thorough and precise. So you have to think about the different tools that you're using and the tasks that you're doing to get the most out of them. So if you haven't started, just start and start with something that's low value, easy. And then once you find some things in your personal life that you can use it for, I think then you can start to think about, okay, how can I start using this at work?
Wonderful. It's definitely important to remember that different models are good for different things, and you experiment and see what works best. A follow-up question to what you just mentioned about, trying individuals trying to upskill themselves. Like, how do we incentivize them to do so, given that legal professionals already have so much on their plate? Do you think there's going to be increased demand in the labor sector for legal skills, for legal professionals that have AI skills? Do you see that shift? Do you see more companies looking for hiring lawyers and legal professionals that are already good at prompting or using AI tools and legal tech tools to do their work more efficiently?
I mean, I definitely think so. A lot of companies, right, have mandates to roll out AI and to reduce costs. And also the economic climate that we're in. How can we get more out of the current team that we have? And AI is a perfect solution for that. And so, although I don't necessarily, I haven't been paying attention. I don't think it's necessarily like in job post unless it's in legal tech. For example, our company is looking for legal engineers. So we've created, there's a whole new position for legal trained professionals in legal tech companies. So that's definitely very exciting. I do think we will start to see people, companies that have AI adoption and are using AI and their teams are used to using AI. If you haven't used AI and you're interviewing with someone who has, that person who has is definitely going to have a leg up. And also conversely, I think if you're used to using AI and you're interviewing with companies and the company is not using AI, that would be a huge deterrent for me. I don't want to go back to doing things manually if I've been using AI. And as for like teams and managers, I think it's really important if you want to change this mindset and to adopt AI amongst your team. First, you need to provide training. So at the beginning, I didn't think that it was very important to provide training. I was just like, oh, you just talk to these tools. And lawyers are really great at finding information and interrogating. Like we have great communication skills and skill sets. But lawyers seem to have, and legal professionals seem to have a challenge of translating that into AI because it is a different way of thinking. So I think you need to provide training on whatever tool you have. And again, different tools respond differently. So you need to provide training on that tool to your team to upskill everyone. And then you need to give them space, permission, and time to test it out and play with these tools. And so that's something that is unusual, I think, right? Like just telling a lawyer, hey, go play with this, fail, and then share your failures afterwards. We're not used to doing that. So, again, that part of the training and moving forward with AI is also a mindset shift. So, giving your people the permission and the time and the opportunity to experiment and then talking about it. So, if you have team meetings, people share their AI success stories or share their AI failures because we also are going to learn from, our failure. Additionally, like maybe if something you did didn't work, maybe someone else on your team can help you fix it. So I think there needs to be space made in the teams to utilize these tools and then people can get into the habit and then start to integrate it. So when I'm teaching about AI, we want to get to a place where AI is integrated into our daily work and we're using it strategically. So not only do we understand how to use AI, but we understand where we should use it and where we shouldn't use it.
Yeah, that systemic thinking is definitely very important, and it should really come from the management of the company to be able to fully integrate that across the team. And earlier you mentioned we were talking about different workflows to which AI can be applied, and you mentioned contracts, and I wanted to focus a little more on that. I remember you said at some point that you don't use AI and tools like ChatGPT or Claude to review the entire contract. You instead use a more targeted approach in that space. So what is that, and how do you actually use AI in contract work? If you could tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, well, I think there's a difference between broad purpose tools and then legal specific tools. So I would definitely advocate for using legal specific tools for contracts. That's going to make your life easier because it's purpose built. But if you only have access to ChatGPT or Copilot or Claude, then you are going to have to become much more structured in how you are reviewing your agreements to make sure that they're not missing pieces. So, one of the things that LLMs have sort of shown is that they actually can act like a person when reading an entire agreement. They'll be really good at the beginning, and then they'll kind of get lost in the middle, and then they'll have a sort of a strong ending. And so, if you're not doing things in the back end, if you don't have another layer of orchestration that's helping read those contracts, then I'm not going to rely completely on what ChatGPT or Claude has summarized or given a legal analysis, right? They don't have extra work going on in the background for legal work. So instead, I'm actually going to look at, let's say, like let's just say a clause or a paragraph or a section of the contract, give the AI context and then work with that section, get it revised, and then have it draft a comment for me. And so that does create some more manual work and back and forth. Whereas if you're using, a legal specific tool such as Wordsmith AI or any other legal tool, you're not going to have to do that extra manual work. So, and you're going to be able to trust that output. Although I do say at this point, I think all AI output should probably be reviewed by a human. Please don't ever blindly, use AI output without checking it. But again, legal specific tools should make it easy for you to verify that the information and the output is correct. So I think, if you are working with Copilot, you're going to have a harder time and it's going to take you longer. You still will get productivity gains out of it, but it's not going to be the same as if you're using a legal specific tool.
Absolutely. So the key takeaway from this is try to use a legal specific tool. They are better
Yes.
at legal specific tasks.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a question, a follow-up question about verifying AI generated work. There are people who think that it takes so long to verify everything AI has generated that it almost defies the point. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think it still saves you so much time that it's worth doing it? Are there smart ways to go about it? For example, if you're working on contracts.
Well, I think it depends on your task. Like you have to, again, use it, figure out we all have different tools. And then as you're using that tool, you can also figure out its limitations and strengths. So when you're actually, review, like I would not, like I said, I'm not going to put a contract into ChatGPT and solely rely on its summary or its legal analysis of that contract. So then I have to
Yeah.
decide, what do I want to do with this contract? Is it a red line contract? Maybe I only want to focus on the portions that are changed. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and use ChatGPT just to focus on the red line portions. If it's an extremely valuable, contract, I will maybe do a first pass with ChatGPT, but then I'm still going to read it. So you have to think about the tool that you're using, and how it can help you rather than hinder you or create more work. So I think it's sort of limited in how we think about the tool and how we can
Mm.
interact with it. You can also, in the contracting situation, read the contract, do your summary, upload the contract in your summary into ChatGPT or Claude, and then ask it to verify it to see if you've missed anything. So there's all these different ways you can use it. I think you just need to think about what is your task, what is your goal, and then how can the tool support you in that goal. And in that analysis, I think you need to think about, what does the end result look like, and is this something that's extremely valuable, or can good enough is good enough, or does it have to be absolutely 100%
Mm.
perfect and precise? But I still think AI can add value. Just how much value will depend on what tool
What you're
you're
trying to
using and
achieve.
how you're using it.
Absolutely. Before I go into my next question, I wanted to tell the audience that we'll take the last few minutes for your questions. So make sure to put them in the chat, and we'll address them towards the end. But so my next question really was one of the biggest barriers to getting the a high quality output from whatever AI tool you're using is knowing how to prompt. And that's something that's a skill that you'll learn over time, right? So what is your go-to approach towards prompting? Because I know you have a lot of opinions on prompting and what's the right way to do
Yes.
it. And so how do you do it to make sure that the output is as good as it gets and how that it actually works?
But I think that's it's interesting because there's sort of a cycle I think that happens. Like when you first start using the tool, structure and thinking through how you're going to present the information to the AI is really important. And one of the ways of thinking about this is treat it sort of like a new person who's just joined your company who's new to law, like a young, super young legal professional who's just joined your company. So they need context about your company and your company best practices, as well as some legal context if you're using the broad purpose tools, right? So you'd have to craft a prompt and instructions that a person would be able to follow in that way. And then as you start using these tools more and more, you'll get to a point where then you don't even need that structure because you're already thinking. You know what you need to highlight,
Mm.
you know your goal. So then you'll get to a place where you can just sort of spew out the information. And that works for the majority of cases. However, if you're doing something that's repetitive, and you need consistency and you need precision, then I think you are going to need to look at the tool you're using and whether or not you're going to need to, create a longer prompt, maybe in Markdown or XML, something that's much more structured to really sort of fine tune and tighten that output. And then from there, that's where then I would also look at custom GPTs or Claude projects or in Wordsmith workspaces, right? Building your own sort of AI assistant to help you with that task, which comes with custom instructions and its own sort of knowledge and document library.
Do you maybe give us a very quick example of what a bad prompt versus a good prompt look like and how the outcome would be different?
Yeah, so I mean the a bad prompt is always, review this agreement. You give zero context. A broad purpose tool is going to then have to decide what you mean and what's important to you. If you're using a legal specific tool, it's probably actually going to be a little bit better because they've done things in the back end to enhance your prompt to tell the large language models what it is that a lawyer wants. But if I'm using ChatGPT or Claude and I say review this agreement, it's very general. You're going to get back something very general. A better prompt would be review this agreement. This is, a vendor agreement for accounting software that my CFO is purchasing. It has
Mm.
AI in it. We are concerned about payment terms, termination rights, and if they're going to train on our financial data. And then I like to end with, tell me what more you need for me to do this. Or, does that make sense? Or explain your reasoning. So end with something that starts a conversation to see if it needs more information or understands the request that you've given it. So I've given it my goal, like the goal, the purpose. I've given it the task, what I want it to do and what I want it to produce, a summary. One of the things that I could have done to make that prompt better would do the format of the
Mm.
summary and how long. Right? So if we give it all this information, then it'll come back with something better. But I also like to tell people you don't have to get like the perfect first prompt. It's supposed to be a conversation. So just start
Yeah.
somewhere and then you can refine through prompting.
Perfect. So we've been talking about prompting, and I know that there are a lot of people willing to learn more about prompting. So are there any resources or best ways to, really start learning how to prompt? Do you follow any existing guidebooks, or it's just an experimentation process for those who haven't started this journey?
Well, there's different people I follow, but I go to actually in preparing courses. So I teach courses. I have Maven 1 hour courses on prompting, which you can take. Feel free to message me and I can give you discount codes. Or for some of them, we're also giving away free seats. So that's one. And then be on the lookout from us because we're going to have some more free resources coming in the next month or two. But what I've done is I've gone to Copilot, Claude, OpenAI, Gemini, and I've gone to both their, say, consumer-facing prompting guides, and then also the prompting guides when you're actually building on top of their products. So if you're accessing, let's say, OpenAI through their API, how do they tell engineers to do those system prompts when you're creating? And plus, then sprinkled in with information from our engineering team and also from our legal engineers. And so from that, I've gathered and put together, here are some of the best ways that you can get started with prompting. And I've actually created a Claude artifact from that. And so we can share that. So then you can see some of the tips and tricks for getting started prompting, some strategies, and then also some different approaches. And a lot of it is experimentation to see what works for you and also to see what works for the tool that you are using.
Thank you, Laura. Just wanted to briefly comment that we'll be circulating this practical resource along with the recording of this conversation to all of you who registered for this conversation. So don't worry about that. And so I just wanted to mention if there are no questions in the chat, if you have any questions, please make sure to type them in the chat because we only have 3 minutes left for the end of the conversation. But in the meantime, I was going to say that a lot of this conversation has been AI positive. So we are embracing AI. We are talking about how to best use it. But I also wanted to ask you from your experience, what are the common pitfalls when you're trying to start using AI? Is there something that you need to watch out for? Are there things that you should avoid? Because obviously, when we use AI in legal workflows, we handle sensitive data and information that we wouldn't necessarily want to get compromised. So any ideas or advice on that would be appreciated.
Yeah, well, I mean, it definitely depends. Are you using an enterprise level tool or not? And what is your company policy, right? First and foremost. If you are experimenting and you want to put in some, let's say, your personal information or maybe some confidential information that's not highly confidential, but something that you're concerned about, then make sure in any of these models that you've turned off training. You can usually go in and say, don't train on my data. So then that lets the AI company know that they're not going to take your data and then put it into their training sets and use that to train the models. So that's the first piece of advice. Go and turn that off. Immediately, the more that you pay, the more security that is provided. And then for enterprise level, normally they will have them in their own cloud, right? So that's one of the benefits also of legal specific tools is that you have that security and confidentiality and that promise. So, make sure that you're really clear with your company about what you are allowed to put in company material wise. And again, that will depend on the level of tool that you're using and then also the level of risk of the information that you're dealing with. Sales contracts in certain situations might not be very confidential. For example, I worked at a company where we had most of our sales contract online. So we didn't care if we put it into, a less secure AI because it was already made public, right? That's very different when I've worked somewhere where there's IP issues, and we need to protect our IP. We're going to be very careful not to put anything of IP or even patentable right into AI. So you need to think about what data you're putting in and then what clearances you've been given by your company.
Wonderful. And I think we've used up 30 minutes that we had for this conversation. Thank you so much, Laura, for joining. To all of you watching this conversation, please follow Laura. She's usually sharing a lot of useful guidance on LinkedIn if you'd like to start using AI and learn how to prompt and so on. As promised, we'll share the recording of this conversation as well as a practical handout that Laura prepared. So hopefully all of that will be useful on your AI journey. And thank you again for joining.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.